Before I start, tell me one simple thing. What state are you watching from? Wyoming, Idaho, Texas, maybe all the way out in Maine. I am always curious how far a soft mountain town voice like mine can travel. And thank you for sitting with me, because the beginning of this story is not easy to swallow. It is as cold as that morning in Jackson Hole, when I walked into a meeting that should have changed my entire career after 18 years. My name is Daniel Merrick. I am 52. And if you live anywhere in the West, chances are you have driven past a dam or reservoir I quietly watched over for nearly 2 decades. My official title is Chief of Wyoming Reservoir Emergency Operations, but that sounds fancier than it is. The truth? My job is part babysitter for unpredictable water, part emergency room doctor for lakes that always want to misbehave. It is not glamorous, but it saves lives, and I used to carry a kind of pride in that. That morning, the snow was so heavy I had to brush off my shoulders 3 times before walking into the old agency building. This place always smelled the same, a mix of damp paper, old ink, and something that felt like time itself clinging to the walls. The air conditioning worked when it felt like it. The ceiling lights flickered like they had been begging for retirement for 10 years. And still, I stayed at this place for 18 years. No complaints, no drama, just faith that the people upstairs would eventually see what I was worth. I stepped into the conference room and at exactly 8. The wall clock had died a week ago, but no one bothered replacing the battery. Harold Benton was already at the head of the table, his big frame spilling over the arms of his chair. He was the operations director, the man with the authority. I was the man with the responsibility. We had worked through hundreds of emergencies together, but I always knew my line. I did the work. Harold took the praise in board meetings I was not invited to. That morning he stuck to his usual habit. No eye contact, no greeting, just a chin flick toward the chair across from him, like I was some intern interrupting his coffee break. On the table sat an old brown folder. I knew exactly what it was. Today was supposed to be the handoff for the promotion I had been waiting nearly 2 years for. Everyone in the department said I deserved it. I had even started to believe it. But Harold did not let me get a single word out. He pushed the folder toward me with 2 fingers, his voice flat and empty, like he was reading from a maintenance log. Your promotion is canceled. The board is suspending all departmental expansions. That was it. No explanation. No apology, not even the cheap kind. Not a single moment of eye contact with the man who had kept this state from flooding for 18 years. He said it the way someone might announce elevator repairs. I remember sitting still for a few seconds, feeling a thin sheet of ice crack under my feet. Time froze. I could hear metal clinking in the hallway, snow tapping the roof, and Harold's pen tapping out some meaningless rhythm on the table. Betrayal is not loud, I realized. It is quiet, cold, precise. I looked at him, searching for any real emotion. But all I saw was that fake busyness people put on when they cannot face what they have done. Or maybe he really was busy. I do not know if Harold was trying to look occupied or if his brain just could not find the mute button. But people who cannot look you in the eye when delivering something this important, they are not overwhelmed. They are hiding. I did not respond right away. I have saved an entire town once because I sensed a hairline crack in a dam just from the way the ground vibrated. I have stood in blizzards, restarting release valves when the whole tech team was snowed in. Yet that morning, Harold erased every effort, every sleepless night, every bit of hope with a few dull sentences. Not because he had the authority, but because he knew I never fought back. And that silence had been used against me for far too long. I breathed in slowly. Cold air, but it cleared my head. What died in that moment was not the promotion. It was the last piece of trust I still had. Whatever respect I once had for Harold fell away like the snowflakes outside the window. Light. Final. I closed the folder, slid it back across the table, and said only one thing. I understand. I did not trust Harold, not even a fraction. But I trusted the crack forming inside me. That meeting ended, but the real conflict was just beginning. And it was not about the canceled promotion. It was about the truth I could no longer ignore. My silence had turned into permission for people to treat me like I did not matter. And I knew right then it was time to break it. When I walked out of that meeting, I did not head straight for the parking lot like I usually did. I stopped in the hallway right where the old carpet had worn down so thin you could see the webbed backing underneath. I stared at it and felt a strange pull. It looked exactly like me after 18 years. Still standing, still working, still holding everything together, and no one was noticing how much I had been worn down. People say time is the best test of loyalty. I agree. But maybe I should have used that line on myself years ago. When I looked back at everything I had done, I realized I had always been the kind of man who believed that doing the right thing would eventually be seen. Save whoever you can. Let fate take care of the rest. I never bragged, never broadcast my accomplishments. I just worked. Every ounce of me went into keeping the safety system running for everyone who depended on it. But that silence turned into a tool others used to their advantage. I am not retelling the past to excuse my own naivety. I am telling it because if you understand these three events, you will understand why I was angry and why Harold's little shove of that folder snapped something inside me I thought would never break. The first event happened in the winter of 2009, one of the coldest winters I have ever lived through. Temperatures dropped to -25, and the ice was so thick that when you stepped on it, it did not crack. It trembled like a giant sheet of glass. That day, the pressure sensors beneath the North Dam flagged something unusual. No one was certain, but my experience told me there was a hairline fracture forming under the ice. The problem was that the main gauge had frozen over and shut down. All we had to go on was the instinct of a man who had lived with that reservoir far too long. I climbed into the narrow service tunnel beneath the dam myself. The ceiling pressed low. The water was so cold it felt like needles stabbing straight into my skin. My headlamp lit only a small patch in front of me. Everything else was thick darkness. I followed the sound of leaking water to find the secondary shutoff valve, then forced it tight before that fracture widened. If I had been 30 minutes slower, the town below would have lost every home near the base of the mountain. But we prevented it. When I climbed back up, soaked like I had been dragged out of the lake, Harold stood a few yards away. He watched me for a moment, then said one sentence. "Good work. I will report this to the board." The next day, the local paper printed a headline. Operations Director Harold Benton resolves the dam pressure incident. My name was nowhere. I did not complain. I thought saving lives did not need credit. But that was the first time I realized Harold did more than take credit. He treated my work like a free gift. The second event came in the summer of 2015, during a brutal drought that nearly broke half the farms in the region. Water levels dropped so low that you could see patches of the lake bed. Farmers were desperate. Local officials were panicked. They wanted to release more water to save the crops. But doing that would starve the downstream town of drinking water. It was a deadlock that no system could solve on its own. For 3 straight weeks, I moved between meetings at town halls, farms, and county offices. I listened far more than I spoke. That is how I understood the truth. Farmers did not just need water, they needed to feel like they were not being abandoned. In the end, I created a rotating distribution schedule based on real consumption and proposed a temporary water sharing plan. It was not perfect, but it kept the crops alive, and no one had to lose their tap water. By the end of summer, a state representative praised the solution. But the man who shook hands on the stage was still Harold. He led the entire negotiation, Harold said to the press. I had not led anything. I had just tried to fix the problem. But when I heard him say that, something familiar rose in me. My silence, once again, was treated as agreement. The third event happened in 2018, during a chaotic rainy season, when mountain streams came down like broken dams. Our flash flood warning system was being upgraded at the time, which meant many of the automated devices were unreliable. I had written a temporary manual warning protocol using data from 3 old monitoring points. The plan was not modern, not impressive, but it was accurate. When water levels spiked, my temporary system was the only thing that triggered an early alert. 600 families evacuated just in time. Some people said I saved an entire valley that day. But in the annual report, Harold presented the upgraded warning system as having functioned perfectly. He did not just take the credit. He erased the existence of the solution I built. Looking back, I finally saw the pattern. Every time I quietly handled a crisis, Harold quietly harvested the reward. And I never fought back, never spoke up, never defended myself. I kept believing that as long as the public was safe, it did not matter who stood in front of the camera. My coworkers knew the truth. They did not talk about it. But the way they always came to me first when something went wrong said enough. They trusted me. They knew who wrote the nameless reports. They understood that if I took a single day off, the whole system would shake like that old ceiling light in the hallway. But there was one thing they did not know. My biggest weakness was not silence. It was loyalty. I kept believing loyalty was the best thing I could give an organization. Until the day Harold pushed that folder toward me and told me my promotion was canceled. One sentence was all it took for me to understand something I should have seen back in 2009. One-sided loyalty is not a virtue. It is a lock that keeps you trapped in a place you should have left long ago. I walked back to my office after the meeting with Harold, moving more slowly than usual. Not because I was tired, but because I needed a few minutes to gather what had just happened. 18 years of devotion, ending so quietly it barely made a ripple. When I opened the door, the first thing I saw was not my cluttered desk or the flood model map spread out across it. It was the round ceiling bulb, still flickering in that steady rhythm, like it was sending out a distress call. I let out a short laugh, the kind that has no joy in it. That bulb was more honest than any promise Harold had ever made. At least it flickered because it was truly worn out, not because it was trying to dodge the truth. I set my coat on the chair, sat down, and opened my computer. My fingers hovered for a moment over the inbox. On a normal day, I would be flooded with urgent emails from the tech team, farmers, the state office, and the occasional request from groups like the Northwest Salmon Association asking us to adjust water flow for migration season. But that morning, my inbox was strangely still. A few automated alerts, a reservoir pressure report, and one email I had not opened for 6 weeks. Utah Flow Authority. I read the name and felt something click quietly inside my head. I remembered the day that message came in. I had been dealing with a landslide near Highway 89, and I skimmed the email before climbing into the utility truck. Its content was simple, almost modest. They said they had followed my work for years and wanted to discuss a potential collaboration. I told myself I would respond later. But then another emergency came up, then another meeting, then another promise from Harold about that promotion. And the email disappeared into the background. I had left an open door untouched because I was too busy guarding a door that had been shut on me long ago. I opened the email. The same line stared back at me. We would be honored to discuss with you our new direction for Western water management. I had not replied, not because I doubted my ability, but because I still believed that if I stayed loyal just a little longer, if I stayed patient just one more time, Harold would keep his word. He would promote me. I would finally be recognized. I would finally belong here. I leaned back and exhaled. The regret that rose in me was not about missing an opportunity. It was regret for me, for the way I had let blind faith steer me for far too long. My eyes drifted toward the small photo frame on my desk. Me and my daughter Anna, standing near Shoshone Falls during last year's trip. Anna is 26 now, a nurse at a hospital in Idaho. She was the first to tell me I needed to stop sacrificing so much for this job. I always brushed it off, saying everything would change once I got promoted. But she only smiled that sad smile people wear when they have seen too many disappointments already. Dad, you do not owe loyalty to anyone more than yourself. At the time, I thought she was just trying to ease my stress. But now, after this morning's meeting, her words came back with a clarity that felt like someone whispering right beside me. And then I remembered someone else, Hank, the coworker who was nearly 10 years older. He had been chief engineer before Harold intentionally or accidentally pushed him away from the center of everything. One night after a long shift over 2 cups of terrible coffee, he told me a line I have never forgotten. Do not let loyalty turn into a shackle. It saves no one, not even the person wearing it. Back then, I laughed it off, assuming he was bitter. Looking at it now, I see it was a warning I chose to ignore. I pulled my laptop closer and reread the email from Utah. Something inside me settled. Not pain, not anger, but awakening. A quiet clearing, like when you finally look up at a crossroads and actually see the sign pointing forward. I sat there for a long moment. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10. I did not count, but I knew something in me was shifting. Something that, if I did not act on it right then, would trap me in the same mistake I had made for 18 years. For the first time in my career, I placed my hands on the keyboard with no thought of supervisors, no thought of Harold, no thought of the board or their empty promises. I thought only of myself and the future I should have had long ago. I typed one simple line: "Thank you for reaching out. I would be glad to discuss this opportunity." I pressed send, no hesitation, no asking permission, no worrying about who might be offended. Then I leaned back in my chair and let the truth wash over me. The morning had started with a collapse, but in that very moment I realized something important. Sometimes you only see your path after someone knocks down everything familiar. And I realized one thing more clearly than ever. My silence would no longer be a chain. It would be a choice. And the first choice I made was stepping away from a place that had never known how to value me. The bus pulled out of Jackson Hole before the sun had even woken up. I sat by the window, watching snow cling to the glass and slide down in thin lines, just like everything that had slipped out of my hands after yesterday's meeting. I did not know what I was stepping into, but for the first time in a long while, the mix of anticipation and nerves did not weigh me down. It made me feel awake. As the bus crossed the low hills leading into Salt Lake City, I spotted the headquarters of the Utah Flow Authority in the distance. The building rose with wide panels of glass catching the morning light. Not the cold light of old bulbs, but the kind that makes you straighten your back without realizing it. Something in that sight made me pause, not out of awe, but because I felt, in a strange way, that this place understood what I had done long before I ever arrived. I stepped through the front doors. The air inside was nothing like Wyoming. No scent of damp paper, no rattling from machines on their last legs. Everything was bright, precise, and centered around a large screen displaying a real-time map of the state's water system. Levels, pressure, snowmelt, flow rates, all moving in clean, steady rhythms like a well-kept symphony. I stood there for a few seconds, long enough for a man to approach from a side door. "Daniel Merrick, we have been waiting for you." He offered his hand. The handshake was firm, not overpowering, but solid enough for me to feel the respect of a real leader. "I am Samuel Klein." I had heard that name for years. Known for expertise, known for honesty. And in that moment, I knew I was standing in front of someone entirely different from the kind of man I had just walked away from. He led me down a wide hallway. Through the glass walls, I saw teams of engineers gathered around forecasting models, talking in even tones, unrushed, unpanicked. Not the constant firefighting I had grown used to. Here, work looked like building something lasting, not trying to keep something broken from falling apart. When we stepped into the conference room, Samuel motioned for me to sit and placed a blue folder in front of me. I recognized it the moment I saw the first page. It was the protocol I had written during the 2-year upgrade of the Wyoming warning system. Every page carried my notes, drawings, and symbols. But what froze me was not that it had made its way to Utah. It was that it had been organized carefully, categorized clearly, and turned into a real training manual. "We use this set in our onboarding program for new engineers," Samuel said. "My team values both the accuracy and the practicality in every model you design." I sat there letting the words sink in, not out of pride, but I had never heard anyone speak that way about my work. In Wyoming, my protocols were often ignored until something broke. Here, they were read, understood, and taught. I said half joking, half honest. I'm not used to people actually reading procedures I write. Back home, they usually skip them and call me in a panic instead. Samuel laughed lightly, a kind laugh, not polite, the kind of laugh that comes from someone who understands the history buried beneath a single sentence. He did not ask why I left Wyoming. He did not ask about conflicts, problems, or frustrations. He simply opened another folder, this one outlining a 10-year expansion plan for the state's safety and water operations. A new division is being built. We need someone who does more than read theories, someone who knows what happens when a valve refuses to close when storms come earlier than the forecast, and when the automated system shuts down from the cold. You understand these things better than anyone we have met. If you agree, the role of Director of System Safety and Operations will be yours. I looked down at the table, not to avoid his gaze, but to steady myself. It had been a long time since anyone told me they needed my knowledge. Not my ability to put out fires, not my willingness to patch holes others created, but my actual expertise. I lifted my head. Samuel was still watching me with that calm, unwavering expression. "We have followed your research and proposals for 4 years," he said. "This is not a coincidence. We have wanted you here for a long time." One simple line, but enough to shift every piece inside my mind into place. I picked up the pen. No hesitation, no asking permission, no worrying about who might be upset. I signed. And as the pen left the page, I understood that I had just stepped into a place where I did not have to stay silent to survive. A place where my work was seen, heard, and valued. A place where I could begin again. Late, but not too late. I returned to Wyoming over the weekend with the new contract tucked neatly inside my jacket. I did not tell anyone. Not because I worried about offending someone, but because I wanted everything done in the right order. I would finish my handover before submitting my resignation. I would leave every system in the best shape possible. I did not want the people in Jackson Hole to pay the price for the way I had been betrayed. On Monday morning, I arrived at the office earlier than usual. I sat down, opened my laptop, and began writing the handover list. The heaviness that had shadowed me for days was gone. Inside me was something strangely calm, like the surface of a lake after a storm. The undertow was still there, but the surface had settled. I was reviewing the warning protocols when I heard a soft knock on the door. I thought it was the mail clerk, but when I looked up, I saw Nora standing there. Nora Thompson, the best geotechnical engineer on our team, the one Harold claimed was too cautious, too rigid, too slow, which was what a man says when he refuses to read data. Nora stared at me for a long moment before stepping in and closing the door behind her. She placed a sheet of paper on my desk. "I am resigning. I will be gone in 2 weeks." I kept my face steady, but something tugged inside my chest. I asked quietly, "Why? Did you find a new opportunity?" Nora shook her head. "Not exactly. I just cannot stay here anymore. I am tired of explaining everything twice, once to you so we can coordinate, once to Harold or his nephew so they do not make it worse." I said nothing. Nora exhaled. "I heard you are heading to Utah." I nodded slowly. "So the rumor mill runs faster than our flood alerts." Nora laughed softly, then her expression settled again. "Wherever you go, I will find a way to follow. Any place you work will be safer with you there." I did not reply. I folded her letter and set it aside. People often think I am cold because I hold myself together, but the truth is simpler. I do not like letting emotion break the line of my thoughts. That is how I am built. Earthquakes inside, frozen lake on the surface. Nora left. The door had not even fully closed when Lucas appeared. I almost laughed. If this was some kind of surprise gathering, it was getting out of hand. Lucas did not wait for me to speak. He placed his resignation on my desk, just as Nora had. "I am leaving, Daniel. I have had enough." I looked at him, young, energetic, brilliant, and the one who suffered the most because Harold's nephew, Evan, who kept taking credit for the hydrology models Lucas spent countless nights building. "Reason?" I asked. Lucas sighed, then gave me a smile I had never seen on him. Light, steady, determined. "You are gone. There is no one left to shield me here. I am not going to be Evan's punching bag anymore." I studied him. I thought I was used to people relying on me, but something about today hit deeper. Not because of responsibility, but because I realized how long they had been left unprotected. Lucas waited for something, anything, but I said only this: "Keeping you safe was my job. Choosing where you grow is yours." He smiled. "You do not have to worry. I chose." He walked away, leaving the letter behind. I had barely taken a breath when Mark appeared in the doorway. Mark, the system technician. People called him the soul of the control room. 20 years of silent fixes. 20 years of opening valves, closing valves, pulling the system back from disaster. No one had ever thanked him, but he never complained. Mark stepped in, a knit cap in one hand, a resignation letter in the other. I looked at the paper. After the first two, I thought I had braced myself. But when Mark spoke, I knew I had not. I am going with you, Daniel. Not because Utah is better, but because you deserve someone beside you, the way you have always stood beside us. I lifted my head to look at him, not sure what to say. Some people are so gentle that even their simplest words hit you like a blow to the chest. Are you sure? I asked quietly. Mark nodded. Surer than Harold is sure he knows how to read a damn report. I laughed, a real laugh, the first honest one in weeks. When Mark walked out, I looked down at the three letters on my desk. 3 different stories, 3 different people, 3 different kinds of hurt, but all pointing to the same truth. They were not leaving the work. They were leaving the way they had been treated. I leaned back in my chair and breathed slowly. A thought rose in my mind before I could stop it. Harold did not just lose my promotion. Looks like he triggered a full-scale departure mode. I did not say it out loud, but it made me smile in silence. A tiny, tired smile at the idea that life sometimes plays a strange joke, and all you can do is watch it unfold. I did not show big emotions. I did not hug anyone. I did not cry. I did not speak dramatically. But I understood exactly what was happening, and I knew it was not because I was better than anyone. It was because I had never stepped on them to climb. Loyalty does not always come back from where you gave it, but it returns in its own way. And that morning, in a cramped room with flickering lights and old papers rustling on my desk, I realized this was no longer just my story. When one person leaves, it is a choice. When 3 people leave, it is a sign. And when they leave because of you, that is the truth. A truth Harold will never be able to reclaim. I submitted my resignation on Friday morning. No meeting, no long explanation. Just a short, polite, decisive email that closed 18 years the way you gently shut a door that has been loose on its hinges for far too long. Harold did not respond right away, and I did not expect him to. When I walked out, he lost an employee. But when the system failed, he lost something else. The shield he had always relied on. I gave myself a quiet weekend, cleaned the garage, organized my toolbox, started preparing for the move to Utah. I thought I would have a few days to breathe before stepping into the next chapter. But on Monday morning, my phone buzzed so hard it felt like someone was trying to squeeze it to death. 5 missed calls, 12 messages, all from the old team. I opened one text, then another. The first lines were enough to tell me everything was falling apart. Daniel, the reservoir alert is 14 minutes late. I closed my eyes. 14 minutes in this field is not a small error. It is the distance between safety and disaster, between an ordinary night and a farm wiped out by overflow. Mark called next. His voice trembled, but not from fear, from anger. Daniel, the Alpine reservoir system did not trigger on time. Water overtopped the secondary bank and took out part of a valley farm. They are blaming the weather. But you know that is not the real reason. I knew. I had warned Harold countless times that the new pressure coordinator was unstable. He insisted new equipment could not fail. A sentence that showed he never viewed the system through the eyes of someone who operated it daily. By noon, the second incident hit. A sudden flash flood tore through the Rockford Creek community. No deaths, but a few injuries, and widespread panic. Videos showed water rushing across yards, neighbors shouting, children crying. 2 hours later, the media arrived. The state's news station called it a severe warning system failure. That phrase was enough to turn a mistake into an investigation. By late afternoon, an official announcement came. Wyoming was launching an emergency review of the entire water control system. They wanted system logs, operation schedules, and technical explanations. Every line, every minute. That was when Harold called. His name lit up on my screen like a reminder that the grace period on every silence I had ever kept was officially over. I answered. Harold's voice cracked from the very first sentence. Daniel, we have a situation. You know about it, right? Before I could reply, I heard panicked footsteps behind him. Someone was yelling that the water levels were rising. The same chaos I had handled alone so many times. Only now I was not there to steady anything. Harold spoke fast, trying to control the moment with words, the way he always did. The press is all over us. The state wants the data. The consultant does not understand the system. Daniel, can you talk to them? So there it was. He did not need Daniel the person. He needed Daniel the shield. My voice was calm, colder than even I expected. I no longer have any obligation to Wyoming. Harold stalled for a few seconds. Then he lowered his tone, almost pleading. Daniel, the consultant, cannot keep up. They only know how to read a screen. You know every bolt, every weather flaw, every quirk in the system. If you do not help, I will be held responsible. I closed my eyes. So he finally told the truth, even if by accident. You are afraid of losing your position, I said, not afraid someone might get hurt. Harold rushed to object. It is not like that. I just need you to explain that this is temporary. I can restore your promotion. I will tell the board that. I cut him off. Harold, you are offering something you should have done 3 years ago. But now it is too late. I could hear him struggling to breathe evenly, like a man trying to hold on to a ladder, losing its rungs one by one. Daniel, I am begging you, do not let me fall like this. That sentence made me stand up. I looked out the window. Wyoming's sky was calm, almost mocking, a peaceful picture hanging above a collapsing system. You are not falling because of me, Harold. You are falling because of your own arrogance. My voice was quiet, but in each word cut deeper than shouting ever could. Then I ended the call. I stood in the silence of my home, listening to the wind scrape across the roof as if reminding me Wyoming would always be cold, whether I stayed or not. But behind the place I had left, the system was shaking by the minute, a ruined farm, a terrified community. Reporters circling, the state is stepping in, a consultant out of his depth. And for the first time in my entire career, I let a system fall apart without running back to save it. Not because I was irresponsible, but because I finally understood something Harold never did. There are consequences a man has to face when he chooses to ignore the person who kept his entire world standing. That evening, when Harold called again, I was standing on my porch watching snow pile up against the wooden fence. The yard light cast a warm, dim glow, just enough to create the kind of quiet I had been missing for years. I thought I would hear the wind before I heard the phone, but Harold still managed to outrun the Wyoming weather. The phone rang 3 times. I let it ring twice more before picking up. On the other end, Harold drew a breath and spoke. Daniel, I want to talk as 2 grown men. His voice shook faintly at the end, even though he tried to steady it. I had heard him command the tech team through emergency briefings, his tone full of authority, confidence, that I know exactly what I am doing. But now the sound reminded me of a lake surface whipped by wind. Restless, pretending to be calm. You still watching the news? Harold asked. Things are not good. The state investigators are drilling into the logs. The consultant cannot explain anything. The board is asking about decisions from 3 years ago. I listened to every word without interrupting, without pity, keeping the same calm tone I always had. A calm Harold never understood. And then he finally said the part I had known was coming. Daniel, I want you to come back, just temporarily. When everything settles, I will formally recommend you for Director of Operations. Highest pay in the division. Full authority. No one will question you again. I leaned against the porch post, watching a snowflake fall onto the wooden floor. Harold still had not spoken the real sentence, but then he lowered his voice. I know I was wrong. But you also know Wyoming cannot run without you. You are the only one who understands the system from the base of the dam to the pump station. We need you. I closed my eyes and took a slow breath. Not because I was emotional, but because I wanted to choose each word carefully. None of them landed sharply as necessary. Harold, I said, you only see my value when everything is already sinking. But I am not an emergency float. Silence followed, a heavy kind of silence. I knew every word I said was hitting the place Harold had avoided for 18 years. I continued, my tone quiet and even. You do not need me. You need results. When everything runs smoothly, you forget me. When the system starts slipping, you remember me as your backup plan. But I was not built to spend my life fixing mistakes someone else keeps making. Harold swallowed hard. I heard it clearly. Then he spoke, his voice smaller than I had ever heard it. Daniel, I am truly sorry. The apology did not satisfy me. It only confirmed Harold had reached the exact point his arrogance had led him to. I did not need him humbled. I needed him to understand why the collapse happened. I answered slowly. I do not resent you. I do not want you to lose your job. But this did not start today. It started when you took credit that was not yours, when you ignored warnings, when you assumed I would always be here, ready to pull you out of the hole. I have climbed down into that hole for you far too many times. Harold rushed in. I will fix it. I will change. Give me a chance. I cannot let this system fall apart on my watch. I looked toward the mountains. The sun was sinking behind the ridge, leaving a streak of light across the snow like a long memory refusing to fade. Years ago, those words might have sent me running back into the storm. But now, the clarity I found in Utah held me steady. Harold, I said, you do not need a chance from me. You need to take responsibility. That is what a real leader does. His breathing grew louder, almost desperate. Then, what is your answer? I gave it with the calmest voice I had, clean, simple, without bitterness. I am not coming back. I have chosen a place where my value is seen. And I hope someday you understand the difference between the one who saves the system and the one the system has to save. On the other end, Harold let out a long, defeated breath. No arguing, no pleading. Maybe he finally understood this was not a negotiation. This was the irreversible outcome of years spent dismissing the person who kept everything standing. I said one final line, I do not wish anything bad for you, but I hope you learn the lesson you have avoided for so long. Respect is not something that shows up at the end. It has to lead from the front. I ended the call. No victory rush, no triumph, just a clarity as clear as the lake's surface at dawn. I had stepped out at the right moment, not too early, not too late. The rest is a lesson Harold will have to record in his own report. That morning in Utah was so quiet I could hear the wind brushing against the glass. I was reviewing water level charts when Mark walked in, a folded newspaper in his hand. He did not say anything at first. He just set it on my desk and nudged it toward me. Daniel, the state investigation report is out. I nodded and opened the paper. The headline filled half the front page. Official release of the Wyoming Water System Investigation Report. I paused for a few seconds to settle myself, not because I feared anything. I just wanted to take it in with the same calm I had fought to maintain since leaving Wyoming. The summary listed 4 key findings, 4 things our team had known for years, now written plainly for the entire state to see. The first, loss of critical personnel led to diminished operational capability. The report stated clearly that there had been no replacement plan despite multiple warnings. They did not need to print my name. Everyone knew what that line meant. I did not feel proud when I read it. I just saw the simple truth: no major system should ever depend too heavily on one person, even if that person is me. The second, misuse of authority in operations. The report documented decisions made while bypassing proper review, ignoring technical assessments, and prioritizing board deadlines over actual safety. I read each line and remembered every meeting where Harold waved off recommendations because he needed to keep up with the board calendar. None of it surprised me. It was simply written in a language the legal system could now use as evidence. The third, operational procedures were not properly taught. New employees admitted they learned everything by word of mouth, with no official documents or certified training. That made me stop for a moment, not because it shocked me, but because I remembered the manuals I had written, the ones left in drawers, the ones that disappeared after rushed meetings. Paper cannot protect anyone if the person in charge refuses to believe in it. The fourth point made me raise an eyebrow: dependence on a single individual. The report emphasized that once this individual left, the organization had no equivalent capability to replace him. I set the paper down and brushed a thumb along its edge. No pride, no bitterness, just the clear recognition that someone had finally written what Wyoming had avoided saying for 18 years. Mark glanced at me and asked softly if I was all right. I gave him a thin smile. I am fine. This should have been exposed a long time ago. Within hours, the story spread across Wyoming. The news showed footage of the damaged farm, the cleanup along Rockford Creek. No shouting, no riots, just people asking for what every citizen deserves. Transparency. A farmer interviewed on camera said something quiet but sharp. We do not need heroes, we need accountability. That sentence stitched the report together like a needle finding the exact wound. By late afternoon, a short announcement aired at the end of the state news broadcast. Harold Benton, operations director, was forced to resign, effective immediately. No farewell press conference, no speeches, no flowers, no thank you. Just a notice as cold as a frozen lake. Mark watched me waiting for a reaction. I folded the newspaper. No going, no triumph, just a quiet kind of relief. I said slowly that justice does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it is just a front page stating the truth everyone knew but never dared say. Mark nodded. He understood. He had been silenced long enough to know what it felt like. The next day, the state met with the community and announced a slate of reforms. Transparent procedures, mandatory training, no shortcuts and safety checks. Technical decisions must be signed by certified experts. No system goes live without proper testing. These changes should have been made years ago, but sometimes people only fix the roof after the rain has soaked the living room. I read the updates from my office in Utah, a place where staff are properly trained, where procedures are on the table, not locked away, where data is treated as truth, not a prop for board meetings. I did not feel glad that Harold had fallen. I only felt at ease knowing the truth no longer sat under a fog of arrogance. Over the weekend, I drove to Jackson Hole to visit my daughter. Everything looked the same. The mountains still stood. The river still moved as if oblivious to boardroom politics. People lived their lives as usual. They never knew I had once stood behind that entire system, and they did not need to. But as I passed a small shop near the town square, I stopped. On the wooden bulletin board outside, someone had pinned the investigation paper. The first page had a red mark under one line, dependence on a single individual. I stood there for a long time, not sad, not proud, just aware of one clear truth. The truth had finally been put back in its rightful place. And sometimes that alone is enough to help a man breathe a little easier. A year after I left Wyoming, the Utah office had become a second home in the way a workplace is supposed to be. No one knocked on my door at 4 a.m. demanding I fix a crisis. No one dropped files on my desk as if I owed them some invisible debt. Here, everything ran on mutual respect, not fear or reluctant silence. With the whole team working together, we finished the new warning system. It was not just 19% faster. It was transparent. Data went public in real time. Residents could check water flow from a small device in their homes. No one had to stand outside an office door asking questions they should have had answers to long ago. Everything sat clearly on an open, bright, easy-to-read dashboard. Samuel often joked that I had brought a new kind of breath to Utah. But I always thought it was simpler than that. When a system is built on trust, it stands on its own in a way a controlling, outdated organization never can. Every morning, walking from operations to analytics, I saw it. People were not working because they feared mistakes. They were working because they wanted to get it right. My personal life felt lighter too. On weekends, I drove to Idaho, stopped at a small diner off the interstate for hot coffee, then set my fishing line into the Henry's Fork River. My daughter often joined me. She looked older than I remembered. Every time I saw her in her nurse uniform, I felt a quiet certainty that at least one decision in my life had been completely right. We did not talk much. We just stood there, letting the fishing line settle into the clear water. Sometimes I thought real peace had nothing to do with a new title or new success. It was finally putting down burdens that never should have been yours. Early in the fall, I received an invitation to speak at the Western Water Conference. Samuel placed the letter on my desk and said, half joking, that they wanted to hear from the man who pushed Utah's warning speed into what they thought only existed in textbooks. I laughed and told him not to exaggerate. But later that night, reading the letter again, I understood why they had asked me. Not because I was better than anyone, but because I had proven something simple. When you respect people, they build the kind of system you never thought possible. On the day of the conference, I looked out at a room full of seasoned faces, engineers with silver hair, retired operations managers now consulting, People who could write whole books about the mistakes they had fixed over a lifetime. Standing there, I felt grateful for the chance to share something I should have said years ago. In my speech, I offered 3 lessons. I spoke slowly, clearly, without preaching. Just experience. Lesson 1. Loyalty must go both ways. Loyalty only has value when it is given and returned fairly. Otherwise, it is just a rope tying you to a place you no longer belong. Lesson 2. Do not let your silence become the reason people diminish you. I once believed doing things right was enough. But life does not work that way. If you let yourself be pushed aside, they will call it your personality, not your endurance. Lesson 3. Silent revenge is not destroying the place you left. Silent revenge is choosing the place that deserves you. When you walk away and the old system collapses, that is not you getting even. That is the natural consequence of what they sowed. The room fell quiet for a moment after I finished. Some people nodded. Some looked down, thinking about old memories. A few approached me afterward, shook my hand, and told me they had lived through the same thing. That night, back in my hotel room, I opened the window and let the night wind in. I looked at the lights scattered across the valley and felt an unfamiliar ease. Not because I had succeeded, but because I had finally stepped out of a place that treated me like a free fire extinguisher. Now every morning I go to work without the fear that disaster is waiting for me at the end of the hallway. I go with the calm of someone who knows he is respected, heard, and valued for what he truly brings. One weekend afternoon, standing on my porch watching the snow fall, I thought about the people still stuck in places like the Wyoming I knew. People are carrying entire systems on their shoulders without anyone noticing. People believe their work will someday be recognized, only to receive empty promises year after year. And I knew exactly what I wanted to say to them. If this story speaks to you, subscribe to the channel. There are many more stories. Stories about the quiet people who keep whole systems standing while no one remembers their names. In those stories, you might find a piece of yourself. Thank you for listening to the very end. I truly appreciate it.